Did you know that dispensationalism existed before the Roman Catholic Church was formed? The official Roman Catholic Church was formed in about the 4th century with Constantine, when the Roman Empire realized that they could do much better job of conquering with missionary endeavors than by using the military tactics of, the Roman system. That's why they came up with the whole idea of Roman Catholicism. In hoc signo vinces, in this sign conquer. So Constantine says, I'm going to go out and conquer with the cross, and so that's what happened there. If you are ignorant of true Catholic history, they didn't exist in the 1st century. Okay, how do you know that? Read the Bible. There's no pope, there's no sacraments, there's no Eucharist, there's no transubstantiation, there are no nuns, there are no monks, bishops, archbishops, Vatican City, whatever. That stuff didn't exist, okay? But they'll tell you, the Catholics out there, they will say that dispensational theology came about in the 19th century, the 1820s with John Nelson Darby. And they repeat this thing while all the while their theologians understand that in fact dispensationalism was there before the Catholic Church was. I'm going to show it to you. I have this book here, which I talked about in the last video, Dispensationalism Before Darby, and all that this man does, William C. Watson, he's a college professor, and he just goes through and shows the quotes and gives a little bit of commentary, but it's mostly just the quotes. And very interesting here in the introduction, he says, further, many of those revered by contemporary preterists, such as Westminster Assembly divines, Anglican bishops, and renowned Puritans on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean, were actually premillennialists. While preterists claim that premillennialism is new, it is actually preterism that was considered an innovation in the early 18th century. So early 1700s, in other words. Preterism was an invention from then. And it's actually dispensationalism that's older. Very interesting. I'm going to read you some parts, some choice areas here of Chapter 1, Concepts of Dispensations and a Millennium Prior to the Reformation. Now let me just clarify here at the very beginning. And this is what he's showing in this with the quotes. And this is what I've always taught. Dispensational theology, as in the 7 dispensations that I teach and many other dispensational preachers teach, that it's been refined down through the centuries. But to say it was created in 1820, that's not true. It was there earlier, but they might not have said dispensations or the church age or the, whatever type of ages and things. But understanding that there is a coming millennium out in the future, that it didn't all just happen in the 1st century. That's what preterism teaches, that everything happened in the 1st century. Book of Revelation, all of it was fulfilled, and we're just kind of floating through time and space right now, and we're in the millennial kingdom, I guess, somewhat, and whatever. And the Catholic Church teaches that the amillennial system, that there is no millennial kingdom coming. The Jesus ruling and reigning on the earth is through the Pope and the Church, which is absolute total blasphemy to think that Jesus or that the Pope would take the place of Jesus Christ. But that's, vicarious filii Dei, or the, what's the other title that they have? The Vicar of Christ and everything else. They're basically teaching that the Pope replaced Jesus. That's why he's the Holy Father. Holy Father only appears in Scripture in reference to God the Father. So for a man to take the title Holy Father is literally blasphemy. But that's what the Catholic Church is all about. But they teach this lie that there was no such thing as dispensationalism before John Nelson Darby, which is not true. Here it says, page 1, no one doubts the existence of millenarians in the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, but they sprung from the radical Anabaptist fringes. See, if I would go in a time machine back to the Protestant Reformation era, in the early 1500s, when it was really starting to heat up with Martin Luther and William Tyndale and a number of other guys, John Huss and things a little bit before that in the 1400s, Wycliffe in the 1300s. But if you go back, they would call me an Anabaptist, okay, that I'm a fringe Anabaptist. That's what I would have been classified as, my beliefs. And literally my ancestors do go back the Denlinger and Brubaker especially go back to Anabaptist groups, not to Protestants per se. But it says here, most Puritans were historicists, believing they were in the midst of apocalyptic events that they traced through church history. So again, if you look at a lot of the older Protestant Puritan type of readings, they talked about the Pope being the Antichrist, the seat of the Pope being the Antichrist, and and they were into that whole thing. So a lot of the Reformed theology, again, remember what Reformed theology is. It's Catholicism reformed, reforming of Catholicism. Like you have silly putty and you have it, in a sphere, and then you do it again and it's a cube or something. Well, it's still silly putty. All right, that's been my issue with Reformed theology. Like the stuff that a lot of Luther's teachings. Luther abandoned church traditions. It's the sola scriptura. And then he brings out Luther's small catechism. Some major problems there. Luther had some good points and things, but he was quite the heretic in a lot of other areas. And there's a lot of debate whether he was even saved or not. I don't know. You can make arguments back and forth. A lot of what's been written about Luther came about after his death, and a lot of people were lying about him and things and stuff. So I don't know. But the whole thing is there were Anabaptist groups. There were heretics out there, just like I am considered today by the Catholics. But now I'm going to read page 4 here. I'm going to start reading down through. This is some very fascinating things here. Okay? Christianity, continuing from the other page there, it says about it that they acknowledge that early Christians expected an impending apocalypse. According to one 17th century millenarian Puritan, quote, "It was the constant opinion of the church in the very next age to the apostles that there should be a resurrection before the general rising of the last day, an unhappy condition of the faithful upon the earth for c. 10 years. This we may learn from Tertullian, Contra Marcion and Irenaeus, Tractate Contra Omnis Beresis, and Justin the Martyr, Dialogue cum Trifon Judeo. But what Christians soever in this time were in all respects orthodox, maintain the same. It seemed the heretics of those times especially, or indeed only, believed it not." Okay, so in other words, he's saying that they believed in a coming millennial kingdom, which is dispensational. So Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Justin the Martyr, if you want to say it that way, all believed in a coming millennial kingdom. That would make them dispensational. And yet the Catholic Church calls these guys church fathers, includes them in their holy church fathers, but they were dispensational. No mention of dispensationalism before Darby. I think he just got refuted there. Continuing, the early church fathers overwhelmingly believed in the return of Christ to set up an earthly millennium. One of the foremost church historians of the Victorian era, Philip Schaff, wrote of this early belief, even though he rejected it. So at least he's being honest. Quote, "The most striking point in the eschatology of the ante-Nicene age is the prominent Chiliasm or millenarianism, that is the belief of a visible reign of Christ in glory on earth with the risen saints for 1,000 years before the general resurrection and judgment. It was a widely current opinion of distinguished teachers such as Barnabas, Papias, Justin Martyr, Irenaeus, Tertullian, Methodius, and Lactantius. The Jewish Chiliasm rested on a carnal misapprehension of the Messianic kingdom, a literal interpretation of prophetic figures, and an overestimate of the importance of the Jewish people and the holy city as the center of that kingdom." Okay, again, he goes into chapter 2, which is where I'm at right now, with my reading currently. But it gets into the whole thing of replacement theology as well. See, when you go anti-dispensational, then you get into replacement theology. The church has replaced Israel. But you just read the New Testament, you can see over and over again the distinction between saved Jews and Gentiles, the church of Jesus Christ, and lost Jews, where God's saying, my wrath is coming upon them. There's two different mentions of Jews, two different types of Jews, saved and lost. Ones that are received the spirit of blindness, the lost ones. But then you have the others that are the elect, that they're saved, a small remnant that are saved right now. But you don't say, oh, the Jews are gone, there's no more Israel. Well, then what do you do when it talks about that they're contrary to all men? They please not God, and the wrath of God is coming upon them to the uttermost. What do you do with that? If we've replaced Israel as the church. It doesn't work. You have to be dispensational. Continuing here. Even in a recent book critical of dispensationalism, a non-dispensational evangelical scholar has acknowledged, quote, future eschatology came largely to be replaced by otherworldly eschatology and mysticism that closer one got to the Middle Ages. The grip of immanentist eschatology on believers gradually loosened after the 1st century AD. This is as true of Jewish as of Christian literature. A futurist eschatology outlook explains much about Jesus, about the early Christians' belief system, and about the belief system of the author of Revelation. So a guy who's non-dispensational, at least he's being honest there, and he's saying that the 1st century was categorized by people with a futurist belief, believing that there's a millennial kingdom coming. See, that's what this whole issue is about. Is it all in the past? The Bible is just a book that's in the past, and whatever else. We need to update it to make it more understandable and usable, and we can get some good moral things out of it. Or no, there's actually coming a future time period. The catching up of the body of Christ, followed by the time of Jacob's trouble, followed by Christ's second coming, followed by his millennial kingdom. And we look at the book of Revelation as, oh, it's symbolic. No, we don't. We say it's literal. When it talks about 1/3 of the trees being burned up, that's coming in the future because it never happened in the past. See? Well, it happened, but it's symbolic of something or other. No, it's not. No, it isn't. It's actually going to happen literally. And as we see the technology leading towards a cashless system, the implementation of universal basic income and a central bank digital currency and tokenizing of assets and all this other stuff, Bitcoin and blockchain and all this technology stuff going into this, and stable coins and all these other things. And they're getting people into so much debt that the debt is unpayable. Because when you are in debt, that means you're a slave. See, I want to make people free. This all here, this is all debt-free. The Lord provided the money to be able to buy all this stuff. Not because I'm wealthy, but because we made a lot of sacrifices to be debt-free. And I want that freedom for my viewers. I want that freedom for you. I want you to not have any man above you on this earth. I don't want to be the head of your religion. I want Jesus Christ to be the head of your religion. And I believe that way because I'm dispensational. But see, if I'm submitting myself to some church hierarchy, where I have to call some dirty, filthy sinner the Holy Father, and oh, here he comes and I have to bow down, he puts his toe out or something and I have to go kiss it. No, I'm not a slave, and I won't be a slave. Jesus Christ made me free, and I'm going to remain that way. Continuing, page 5. When Justin Martyr was asked around AD 150 whether he believed that Jerusalem shall be rebuilt and whether he expected his people to be gathered together and made joyful with Christ and the patriarchs, he responded, quote, I and many others are of this opinion. Justin Martyr, around 150 AD. That's not 1820. Jerusalem shall be rebuilt, and the people gathered together and made joyful with Christ and the patriarchs. A future coming millennial kingdom. The second coming of Jesus Christ and the new covenant that he sets up then. It's not here now. We're in the New Testament. The new covenant's not here yet. So all Israel shall be saved. That hasn't happened yet. That's the new covenant. Justin Martyr believed that in 150 AD? I did a video many years ago talking about the Council of Ephesus. I got it off of a Catholic website, and they said the Council of Ephesus condemned the millennial, premillennial, pre-trib type of a system. It was a whole article about the rapture. If it's pre-trib or whatever else, what's this all about? And they said, oh, that was condemned at the Council of Ephesus. I think it was in the 4th century, 4th or 5th century or something like that. Long after Justin Martyr. And he says, I and many others are of this opinion. Many others. It was a popular belief. It was the belief system of the Christian church. And it still is today. You don't believe in dispensationalism? Well, you might be ignorant of it, or you might not understand it exactly, or something like that. So I'd have to know more details to really judge your salvation. But if you understand the whole issue and you are radically hateful of dispensational theology, I can tell you right now, you're lost. You're just simply lost. If you can't tell the difference between the gospel in the Old Testament and the gospel in the New Testament, how do I know that you're believing the right gospel? Bit of a problem. Continuing, similarly, around AD 170, Irenaeus claimed it was, quote, an indispensable part of orthodoxy to believe that these things shall indeed come to pass on this earth. End of quotation. Indispensable part of orthodoxy. Doesn't that mean it's required for salvation? Yeah. Around AD 180, Tertullian claimed that he saw the heavenly Jerusalem about to descend to earth, and that Christians should, quote, expect Christ to appear in Jerusalem. End of quotation. Some early Christian sources, notably the Shepherd of Hermas, Pseudo-Ephraim, and the Apocalypse of Elijah, even hint at a pre-tribulation rapture. I had a thing about the Pseudo-Ephraim. I had that in another one of my really old videos. I don't even know if it's still around anymore. I deleted a bunch of the really old stuff, but yeah. The exception is the metaphorical Alexandrian school, Clement of Alexandria and Origen in the early 3rd century, strongly influenced by Neoplatonism. It was not until the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, Catholicism, in the 4th century that there was a move away from a belief in an impending apocalypse. In part, this is because while one looks for a Messiah when oppressed, when Christianity became widespread, there was perceived to be little need for an imminent returning Messiah. According to 18th century Huguenot emigre Pierre Giroux, the afflicted church seeks for consolation. Where can she find it but in the promises of God? When the present prospect is sad and woeful, we must search for it in what is future. In other words, when Christians have it good, they stop looking for Jesus Christ to come back. Hello, modern America. When Christians have it bad, they start saying, I think I'd like to get out of here. It'd be nice to see, the Lord return soon. I have to say something. This isn't going to be fun for me to say. But I have to say it, because the truth is the truth, and a preacher has to speak the truth. I hope times get really bad in America. I hope persecution comes to Christians in America. I don't like to think that. I don't like to say that. But these little church buildings and everything, and the little country club church building, I like my church family. We go there and we have coffee and donuts and we have good rock music, and we can be like the world to win the world and everything. I hope you people get persecuted to the point where you're being tortured and hung in the streets and everything else. I hope it gets bad for you, because that's the only way that some of you actually wake up and say, this probably isn't real. You'll see who are the real Christians real quickly. Study church history. Continuing. By the 4th century, Eusebius of Caesarea and Jerome had begun to attack the idea of a future millennium. Jerome is the one that came out. There was the Latin Vulgate, the old Latin Vulgate, and Jerome made a new version. Where have we heard that before? Jerome's Latin Vulgate to replace the old Latin Vulgate. Isn't that interesting? Almost like the King James Bible, and then they come out with the Revised Version, then the American Standard Version, then the Revised Standard Version, then the New American Standard Version, then the NIV, then the NKJV, then and 200 others. 200 versions in 100 years. What's going on? Huge satanic attack on the King James Bible. You don't need 200 new versions in 100 years. Okay? Unless you're trying very desperately to replace God's perfect word, the King James Bible. Interesting. I'll start over here again at that paragraph. By the 4th century, Eusebius of Caesarea and Jerome had begun to attack the idea of a future millennium, preferring to believe that the growing power of Christianity would bring in a present millennium. Augustine of Hippo followed suit, although he admitted he had once held to the futurist millennial view like many others. And he gives the quotation, gives a footnote there, and it's down here. Again, I'm not going to show this stuff. Get the book for yourself. He later rejected, in his own words, quote, "The church could not now be called his kingdom or the kingdom of heaven unless his saints were even now reigning with him." End of quotation. Many began to see Christ's kingdom and earthly rule as presently existing in the person of the Bishop of Rome, the vicar of Christ on earth. According to the 17th century Puritan Robert Patten, after the 320 year of our Lord, many a truth and error did change titles, each with the other, as popish ignorance, superstition, and idolatry grew. Puritan Increase Mather believed that the, quote, "the Chiliad, the millennium, was now denied until Antichrist began to reign," end of quotation. One historian of apocalypticism, has summarized the history of early prophetic interpretation, saying, "After Augustine, no one in the West believed in millennialism until Joachim of Fiore, for it remained a marginal phenomenon until the Reformation." In other words, marginal phenomenon, the heretic groups, like what I would have been part of if I was back there, we believed it. We didn't give it up because we didn't go along with the Catholic Church. As the church became more Roman, belief that a Messiah would establish an earthly paradise came to be seen as, quote, "an old Jewish fancy," end of quotation. Again, he's, footnote, he's giving footnotes proving all of this stuff. This is a really good book if you want the documentation. In the mid-2nd century, Justin Martyr spoke of different programs of God and different dispensations. And Irenaeus mentioned different dispensations of God, especially of the current church dispensation in the 2nd century. Oh, it came after 1820. No, it didn't. In the late 2nd century, the Montanists expected Christ's return to Phrygia to take place at any time, and as the movement spread throughout the Roman Empire, even the church father Tertullian joined its ranks. In the 3rd century, Clement of Alexandria taught 7 ages: Adam to Noah, Noah to Abraham, Abraham to Moses, Moses to Christ's first coming, Christ's first coming to his second coming, and the millennium. Even Augustine of Hippo, considered the father of amillennialism, which dominated Christian theology throughout the medieval period, taught that there were various dispensations through sacred history. Quote, "The divine institution of sacrifice was suitable in the former dispensation, but is not suitable now. God is the unchangeable creator of mutable things. The dispensations adapted to each successive age. Changes of successive epochs without any change in himself. This exchange of the sacraments of the Old Testament for those of the New had been predicted by the voices of the prophets. All those things which he assigns according to their variety to the several ages. That which was for one age rightly ordained may be in another age rightly changed. The alteration indicating a change in the world, not in the plan of him who makes the change. The ages succeed each other." Augustine of Hippo wrote that long before 1820, writing about dispensational theology. Page number 8. Read a couple things here. Joachim of Fiore, a 12th century Cistercian monk, revived the idea of millennialism. After 8 centuries of millennialism, and was the first after the early church to divide history into different ages or dispensations of God's grace. Then it goes on to talk about how his teachings were later condemned by Thomas Aquinas and declared heretical in 1263. But the point is, he was teaching it. A 12th century monk made the mistake of reading the Bible and started to realize, hey, you know what? It looks like there's different dispensations. There are. And you better get an understanding of that. The Apostolic Brethren, an unofficial and persecuted monastic order in late 13th and early 14th century northern Italy, believed in a doctrine of the rapture that was recorded in 1316 by a notary in Vercelli. Okay? Believed in the rapture. Continuing here, on page 10, in response to the social instability caused by this premillennialism, the Augsburg Confession of 1540 decided to, quote, condemn also others who are now spreading certain Jewish opinions, that before the resurrection of the dead, the godly shall take possession of the kingdom of the world. This condemnation was followed by similar proclamations by Anglicans in the 42 Articles of 1552 and Calvinists in the Second Helvetic Confession of 1566. The Calvinists condemned it? Interesting. All major Protestant groups declared that ideas concerning a coming earthly kingdom were, quote, Jewish opinions or merely concocted fantasies of ignorant enthusiasts. Interesting. Isn't it funny today that we have dispensationalists being lumped in with Christian Zionists? People that say, there's the really far-end Christian Zionist movement that would say that Israel can't do anything wrong and you don't dare speak against Israel for any reason. Well, that's not correct. Okay, that's not New Testament. New Testament teaches that the nation of Israel has rejected Jesus Christ and God's wrath is coming upon them. They're contrary to all men. They please not God. They go about to establish their own righteousness. There's plenty of things to condemn the Jews in the New Testament. Well, then we can hate the Jews. No, that's not what the New Testament teaches either. Okay? We've replaced the Jews. No, it's not what the New Testament teaches. You have to rightly divide the word of truth. There is a remnant right now that's saved. And God is going to bring salvation to the nation of Israel. That's why he's bringing Moses and Elijah, the two witnesses of Revelation 11. And it's Moses and Elijah, not Enoch and Elijah. Again, I have studies to prove that. But the two witnesses come to show signs and wonders to the nation of Israel. The gospel is going to be believed in the future by the Jews. They will turn to Jesus Christ. And that's why I'm doing the stuff exposing the Talmud, because those are the extra scriptural teachings, the oral Torah, as they call it, ways that they took the laws of Moses and they said, okay, now we need to argue about this and we need to, well, what if some guy does this or what if some guy does that? And they get into all this wicked stuff because they're departing from the scriptures. The scriptures are enough. You don't need more than the scriptures. You don't need a bunch of rabbis arguing and then write that on paper and then you can study that for 7 years. You don't need that. You need Jesus. He's the lawgiver. He'll help you to get it all sorted out. You get the Holy Spirit in you and then you won't have to worry about, what age can children start to be sexually active or something like the Talmud gets into. But let me read to you one more thing here. According to 18th century Anglican Bishop of Bristol, Thomas Newton, quote, in short, the doctrine of the millennium was generally believed on the 3 first and purest centuries. Afterwards, this doctrine grew into disrepute for various reasons. It hath suffered by misrepresentations of its enemies, who have charged the millenarians with absurd and impious opinions which they never held. Hello? Besides, wherever the influence and authority of the Church of Rome have extended, she hath endeavored by all means to discredit the doctrine which lay depressed for many ages, but it sprung up again at the Reformation and will flourish together with the study of the Revelation. You read the book of Revelation, you look at preterism and you go, no, sorry. Historicism, no, sorry. Amillennial, no. Postmillennial, no. Post-trib rapture, mid-trib, post-trib, no. You just read the Bible, all right? You'll come away dispensational if the Holy Spirit's within you. It's just that simple. So, the thing that, like I said in my other video, the thing that's making me mad about reading this book is it's just that the evidence is so overwhelming. The first 3 centuries, before Catholicism existed, people were dispensational. He's got the quotes to prove it. It's not my opinion. It's not his opinion. The quotes. But there's a papal agenda there to turn people against dispensational teaching and ultimately against the Jewish people. And they try to bring down and lie about dispensational preachers. Right now there's the synagogue of Satan that are messing around over there in Israel. And they're doing all sorts of evil things over there. And they say, if you're dispensational, you have to be for everything that they're doing. You have to be for the Talmud. You have to be for what they're doing in Hollywood and in the finance world and all these other things. And I can say, no, I don't, because I know what the Bible teaches. I know what the scriptures say about the future of the Jewish people. they're in trouble with the Lord right now. They're in big trouble. And they've rejected Jesus as their Messiah. But that won't be there in the future. You need to understand that the church has replaced Israel. Oh, then you're a Satanist. You reject the scriptures. Oh, you're a dispensationalist. Your teaching just showed up in 1820. You're a liar. And if you're repeating that propaganda out there, by the way, you're going to answer for it. You will. All right? So that's going to be it for this video. I haven't even gotten a chance to read this whole book yet. I'm just in chapter 2. We're talking about the thing of the attitude towards the Jews and whatever, and why a lot of the reformers like Luther, Martin Luther especially, was very much anti-Jew and into the replacement theology stuff. Again, understand that the Protestant system, I'm a Protestant in the sense I protest Rome, but I'm not a part of the Protestant Reformation. I would have been, my type of Christian back then would have been a Anabaptist heretic, a fringe group, just like I'm considered today. You know, what's Denley, or what denomination are you? You know, Bible believer. What's that? What's a Bible believer? You know, is there a church in my neighborhood that says Bible believer? I don't think so. Yeah, we don't have church buildings. Huh? Yeah. But you know, the Protestant Reformation system, all that they did is just try to reform Catholicism, as I said earlier. They just changed it. They tweaked it a little bit. They still want the church buildings. They still want state recognition. They still want to have state-sponsored weddings and births, you know, and all the things work hand in hand with the state. And Martin Luther wrote about that. You know, I have videos to prove that one as well, talking about you shouldn't go against the state and things. He wasn't offering true freedom in Jesus Christ. Myself and others, we are. The reason we're called Anabaptist many times is because Anabaptist or rebaptizer means that you are baptized as an adult. Whereas, you know, the Greek Orthodox system, Roman Catholicism, a lot of the Protestants, they baptize babies. A baby doesn't have understanding of what they're even doing. They're just being held and they got water sprinkled on their head or something. I think the Orthodox actually do it by immersion, which is really crazy. But babies don't have any say in the matter. Okay, you get baptized as an adult, okay, because you understand it. Again, it's about freedom. It's about free will. You do what you want, understand what you are believing and teaching and whatever. That's what I'm for. If you are somebody that believes in independent thought and freedom and liberty, then this is the channel for you. If you're into organized religion where you go and kiss the stinky toes of the priest or bishop, or maybe not them, unless you have some, you know, special relationship there behind the scenes. But I mean the Pope, you know, you go and you puts his ring out and go kiss it. And if you're into that and you're, you know, into calling a man that you disagree with the Holy Father, okay, then this isn't the channel for you. Okay, but you need to quit lying out there, because it just makes the problem worse for you, papists out there. It's just making your problems worse. Just be honest and say, yeah, dispensational theology is actually very old. It goes back to the 1st century, but we've always considered it to be heretical. And debate with the scriptures, argue with the scriptures. But see, you can't really do that, because if, you know, people actually read the scriptures for themselves, including Roman Catholics, then they come out as Bible believers and they start to say, you know what, our system's not really in there. So I think maybe we should go with this Bible believing system. And another little shocker for you too, by the way, if you're new to this whole thing. A lot of Roman Catholicism is actually, or there are things in Roman Catholicism, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are things in Roman Catholicism that were 20th century inventions. 1800s, they came out with the the Assumption of Mary. Literally, I have the Jesuit Dewey Reams Bible of 1610, and they're talking about Mary's funeral. And then in the 1800s, they're talking about Mary being assumed up into heaven. And then they said, but if she was taken up to heaven without dying, then wouldn't that mean she had to be sinless? And so then they came out with the Immaculate Conception in the 1900s. So kind of funny that dispensationalism predates Roman Catholicism, yet Roman Catholicism comes out and says that dispensationalism is new, and yet they have a lot of doctrines in their official system that are new. So the Assumption of Mary and the Immaculate Conception both came out after 1820, yet they won't talk about that very much. So funny how that works. But that's going to be it. And I'm going to be bringing more stuff out about that. That's really interesting. And of course, the cover here, you can see the picture up top there. This is actually from the 1600s, I believe. I was reading this back in the book here further. Skipped ahead a little bit. And it's about, this is supposed to be the Lord here and the saints being called up to him. That's a dispensational belief. But it was done back in the 1600s. Drawn. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm certainly open to people having different thoughts and opinions and whatever else, but I'm not open to propagandists coming along and trying to wreck the faith of those of us who know the scriptures. So if I see you, I'm going to get rid of you in the comments. To whom we gave place by subjection, no, not for an hour, that the truth of the gospel may continue with you. I'm not going to put up with you. All right? That'll be it. Thank you for watching.